Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video, I'm going to be explaining my rating system and I'm going to be sharing how I score sci-fi books. And how I'm going to be doing that is by breaking it down into steps and answering 5 questions in order to give you some insight into my thought process. So the first question is, what am I rating? Well, that seems pretty obvious. I'm rating the book, but I like to think of it as I'm rating my own personal enjoyment of the book. And the reason for that is everybody values different things differently in a book, and the way they will react to or interpret different aspects of the book is going to be different as well. So rather than me trying to say, objectively, this book is an 8 out of 10, or it is an 8 out of 10 for everybody, I'm just going to share something that is unique to me. Because of course, reading is subjective. Question number 2. What is my scoring system? So this is pretty simple. I rate books out of 10 and I do give half marks. And the reason for this is because it gives me a pretty decent range to give scores from. If you include 0 and 10 with half marks, that's 21 different ratings that I can give a book. And if I did rate books out of 5 and I didn't give half marks, I would probably end up giving a lot of 4s, which might get a little repetitive for you guys with just a few 5s and a couple of 3s. Hopefully not too much below that in between. So I like the range of out of 10 with half marks, and I could do decimals or give a percent out of 100, but then you have a lot of options and I might get bogged down in the minutiae of, well, I gave this an 81%, if I give this an 82%, I'm saying it's better. And so I don't want to spend too much time on that. I'll leave that for when I do my top 5 or top 10 videos and can actually compare books directly. So I know some people don't even like giving any scores at all, and I totally understand that perspective. They might think it's too subjective or it's a bit reductive. Well, that's why I talk about the books for about 10 minutes before I give the rating, so it's just a fun little way to summarize some of my thoughts and to keep track of some of the scores, some of the books that I've been enjoying. And even though I have a creative background, I work in a creative field, I do like numbers, take a little bit of an analytical approach to things, so that's why I like the pretty simple out of 10 system. Question number 3, what does each score mean? So going from 0 to 10, I'm going to give you a rough idea of what each of those numbers means to me. So with 0, I'm going to say you've made the world a worse place. Okay, don't write one of these. I don't think I've given any sci-fi books a 0 out of 10, and fingers crossed it stays that way. All right, anything from a 1 to a 4, I would describe as varying levels of disappointment. So anything under a 5, I would say was probably not worth my time in the end after having read it. Coming in at number 5, I would say this is average. So if I were to read 1,000,000 books and rank them from 1 to 1,000,000 in terms of best to worst, a 5 is going to come in at around 500,000. My actual score, average score that I give is going to be a little bit higher than that, and I'll explain that in a minute, but 5 average. So 6 I'm going to say is decent, 7 I'm going to say is good. So this is coming up to the point where I would be able to recommend the book to people, although there are going to be a few reservations, a few qualifications, just a few disclaimers when recommending it, but there's definitely some strong aspects to books in those range. 8, I'm going to say, is great, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for when I pick up any book. The hope going into it is that it's going to be an 8 or above, so an 8 I can happily recommend to people. A 9 is amazing. This is where I start getting excited about the book. I'm thinking about it for a while after I've read it. I want to talk to everybody about it. Thoroughly pumped about a 9. And of course 10, all-time great. This is a desert island book. If I'm choosing between rescuing people and a luggage suitcase worth of 10 out of 10 books in a plane crash, I'm grabbing my 10 out of 10s and I'm living happily the rest of my days on that deserted island. So that's what I mean with the scores. And when I said my average was a little bit higher, I think out of the books that I read, the average score that I give is going to be around probably a 7 to 8, a 7.5, somewhere in that region. And the reason for that is I don't do a lot of impulse reads. I generally do quite a lot of research before I decide to pick up a book and read it. And kind of in terms of increasing levels of importance, what goes into deciding a book would be any awards it's won, its ratings online, reading the premise and being interested in it, someone that I know and I have a relationship with and knows my tastes recommend me a book. And probably at the top of that is I've read the author before, especially if it's something in the same series and I know I like it, I'm almost definitely going to pick that up. So that's why my average score is going to be a bit higher than 5, probably closer to that 7.5. And I haven't done a lot of terribly negative reviews on the channel. Guys, I'm always going to be honest with my opinions. If there are any books I don't like, I'm going to let you know, but I usually reserve that for the comments or on Discord, just because of the amount of time it takes to write, shoot, edit, upload a video. It's just not really all that fun to me if I'm just going to be talking negatively about a book. The purpose of the channel is to get excited about reading sci-fi, so those are kind of the things that I prioritize. But if there is anything that's below a 5, I'll let you know, and I might get around to making a video at some point. But yeah, luckily we've been talking about a lot of good books recently on the channel. Question number 4. What makes up that score? So what are the elements that I'm thinking about or analyzing when I'm trying to put together a score out of 10? Well, all of these aspects are probably going to be pretty familiar, and I've combined a couple to make it simple and to give you 5 elements that I think about. And those are plot and pacing, themes and concepts, characters, world building, and prose. So just to explain a little bit about how I think about each of those, plot and pacing is fairly simple. We have an A point, a B point. How do we get between the two? Is it interesting? Does it hold my attention? How quickly do we get there? All those kinds of questions. Themes and concepts. So I think about themes a little bit more along the lines of what are things that affect individuals, relationships, societies, and then concepts. Often one of the things that draws us readers to sci-fi, you have big picture things like space, time, physics, aliens, technology, all that good stuff to get the old cogs turning in our reading brains. Characters, again, pretty simple. Do I like your character? Or if not, because I don't have to, if I don't like your character, do I at least care about them? Am I intrigued? Am I invested in the outcomes of these people? Do I want to learn more? Next, we have world building. So this definitely makes sense when we have a new world, if it's a different time or a different planet. Does it feel like a rich, real world place that I want to learn more about? Do I really get a sense of atmosphere when these places are being written? But I also think that this can apply even to just modern day settings. You know, when I'm reading the book, do I really feel like I'm in suburban Chicago or on the streets of Rome or wherever the setting is for the book? And lastly, we have prose. So it's essentially the writer's tools in order to convey the previous 4 aspects. How do they go about that? How successfully do they do that with their words and literary tools at their disposal? So something I get asked is, do I average out these 5 elements? For example, do I give each a score out of 10, add them all up, and then divide by 5 to get my score out of 10? And the answer to that is no. And the reason for that is that the weighting that I would give to each category is very different depending on the book. So for example, if we take a book like Red Rising, our main character is Darrow, and it's written in the first person perspective, and we spend a lot of time with his thoughts and his actions. And if I didn't find the character of Darrow interesting, then that book is probably not going to work as well. Whereas if we take a book like Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, that is a book that is quite heavily focused on the big ideas. It is about humanity's place in the universe in relation to space and time and aliens. And the individual characters don't even necessarily stay in the book through each of the periods in the book. And they're kind of just vehicles to help move those ideas along, as opposed to focusing on the intricacies of those characters. So if those characters aren't as well fleshed out, that's not going to hurt the book as much because it's focused on the ideas as opposed to another book like Red Rising. So it's kind of just a gut feel, and I will give my preference, my weighting, my emphasis on the categories or elements that I think are most important to that specific book. And following on from that, I also get asked whether these scores change over time. And the answer to that is not really. So I hear some people say, well, today, for me, this book is an 8 out of 10, but tomorrow I could give it a 9 out of 10. And I would say that that's something that doesn't really apply to me. The score is not set in concrete, but I do generally think about a book for a while before giving it a score. So my thoughts, my score doesn't really bounce a lot over time. However, if there is a particular aspect or idea or something in the book that just stays with me, that I'm thinking about it a week later or a month later, and it just has a real lasting impact, then yes, I could definitely bump it up a half a point or maybe even a whole point. Pretty rarely more than a whole point. Also, if there was a little nagging issue that didn't bother me that much over the time, but the more I think about it, the more it irritates me, I could maybe drop the score half a point up to a point as well. Anything beyond that, I think I would need to do a reread. I'm definitely open to changing the score on a reread, but unless I'm reading a second time, my score is probably not going to change too much over time since I initially gave it the score. And finally, question number 5, what is the purpose of the score? So when I make my reviews, when I give my scores, it's never to say you should like this book and you shouldn't like that book. In fact, I hope you guys like every book. If you've taken the time and money to read a book, I hope it was a 10 out of 10 for you. But short of that being the case, the purpose of these reviews is to not just give the score, but explain reasons for my score. So you can pick out the aspects that make sense to you, appeal to you. For example, you might think, Jonathan didn't particularly like these aspects of the book, but the way he described them or the elements that involved, I do actually like them at the sound of that, and this could be a book for me. Or it could be, Jonathan did like that book, but even the elements that were working for him, I know based on my previous reading experiences, are not so important to me. And that way you can hopefully better place your time and money so you're only reading 8, 9, 10 out of 10 books. That's the hope. And lastly, if you stick around for a while, if you've watched a few of my reviews, firstly, thank you. And secondly, you'll probably start to get a bit of a sense from my taste. So you'll know if Jonathan likes it, I'm gonna like it too. Or if Jonathan likes it, then I'm gonna hate it, because that guy is always wrong. Either way, I hope you find it helpful. I'm hoping to help you find more great sci-fi books to read. So there you go, guys. That is my rating system explained. Get down in the comments and let me know your rating system. Do you rate sci-fi books out of 5, 10, 17, whatever works for you? And let me know what's most important to you. What are you looking for in your sci-fi books? So, as always, guys, I really appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe for more sci-fi content coming soon.